What's going on, y'all? It's Cone back here again today with another episode of After the Buzzer, the show where I recap the NBA games from the night. Only 6 games across the NBA on Wednesday, but a lot of topics I want to cover in this one, some storylines I've been meaning to talk about, so thought I'd go ahead and still make the recap. And in particular, I want to focus on one team who's been having a pretty good season so far. They're surpassing my expectations. They are way surpassing what they've done the past couple seasons. It feels like they're on the right track. But there's one player on the team that's been immensely disappointing so far, a guy that I thought could break out, someone who I was super high on coming out of the draft, and in year 3 of his career, he's having maybe his worst season yet. I want to talk a little bit about his future on the team, where the Rockets go from here, and if this is the beginning of the end for him as a core piece of this squad. But first, leave a like and subscribe if you enjoy, hit the notification bell so you don't miss out on future videos, and as always, would love to hear your takeaways down below in the comments. Let's go ahead and kick things off with Suns versus Rockets. Phoenix was in desperate need of a big win in this one. They've been abysmal as of late since they started off hot. They've lost consistently. They lost in embarrassing fashion to the Mavericks on Christmas Day to fall a game below 500. There was trade rumors surrounding Kevin Durant. They needed something to quiet the noise. And this was a good win. They went into Houston, beat a Rockets team that's been consistently very good at home, dominating one of the league's best defenses. They led by double digits for the entire second half. Kevin Durant goes out there, puts up a 27-10, 16-2 triple-double, I guess trying to silence some of the narratives that he's not a big fan of his teammates at this point. Devin Booker puts up 20 points, 4 rebounds, and 7 assists. Eric Gordon, who is apparently asking for a bigger role in this team, drops 27 points, a lot of those coming in the first half to help the Suns establish that big lead. Udoka Azubuike, huge shout to him. He's been great for them recently as a backup big who's been getting some spot minutes. And in this one, he was the number 1 big off the bench. Drew Eubanks did not play in this game, and he goes out there and puts up 11 and 5 like some of his minutes. Maybe he's found a role in this team. And the Suns do get a pretty good win over, again, a Houston team that's been really good at home. Maybe this is a momentum builder for them. They've got Bradley Beal coming back soon. Maybe this is the beginning of the turnaround, although I need to see some type of sustained success before I believe in this team again. Meanwhile, on the other side, you have the Houston Rockets, who, like I said in the intro, have been putting together a pretty good season so far. With this loss, they fall to 15-14. They've lost 5 out of their last 7 games. They're coming a little bit back down to earth after their hot start to the season, but even still, it's been a great season of growth from the Rockets. Alperen Sengun has emerged as an all-star caliber player. He built on that case tonight. 24 points, 5 rebounds, 1 assist, and 2 steals on 9 of 18 shooting. Big game from him. He is becoming a special talent in this league and feels like he's probably the franchise guy going forward. Cam Whitmore, a young player who hasn't played much for the Rockets this season, spent a lot of time in the G League, put up 12 points in 17 minutes. Great offensive boost for them. I'd like to see him get a few minutes here and there because as good as the defense has been, the offense is wildly inconsistent. And hey, maybe Cam Whitmore can be a bucket getter for you off the bench. Would love to see him get some more opportunities. Fred VanVleet struggled, just 10 points from him in this game. There was no Dillon Brooks, which was a big reason why the defense really struggled for them. He is a huge tone setter. It was also the second half of a back-to-back, so it's not the worst loss in the world. One thing that does make it worse is that Jabari Smith Jr. seemingly sprained his ankle partway through this game, and he was looking really good before hurting his ankle. He's been looking so good as of late. One of the most underrated breakout candidates so far this season. The numbers don't jump off the page, but he's been really good defensively. He's been way more efficient. It feels like he's finding a great role in this team, so hopefully he gets better soon, doesn't miss a lot of time, because it would suck for a guy who's having a fantastic sophomore season. One Rocket who's deserving of a shout despite the blowout is Jalen Green. He came in here tonight against Phoenix and had one of his better games of the season, definitely one of his best games in quite some time with the way his year has been going. 23 points, 5 rebounds, and 3 assists, just 8 of 20 shooting, but he shot 6 of 12 from deep, which is really nice to see from him with how inconsistent he's been from the outside, really over the course of his entire career. Had some really great plays left and right. I thought this was a pretty promising game from Jalen Green, which is great to see, because so far this season, Jalen Green has been really, really bad, and especially as of late. Over the Rockets' last 10 games, Jalen Green, including this game where, again, he played pretty well, is putting up 12.9 points per game, 3.7 boards, and 3 assists, with 2 turnovers per game while shooting 32.8% from the field and 25.9% from deep. He also only played 27.6 minutes per game over those contests because he just hasn't been good enough to get big minutes for a team that's trying to be competitive right now. Ime Udoka's been benching him down the stretch in favor of other guys like Atari Eason or a number of other Rockets players who are just more competitive and bring more on both sides of the ball. His offense, which is supposed to be his calling card, has been wildly inconsistent. Most games, it's just been straight up bad. Sometimes the shots are falling. You're like, hey, this guy could be really good. But most nights, it just feels like he doesn't really have any rhythm out there. There are times where he's really passive and refuses to go get the ball. And other times where he's like, okay, I'm going to finally be aggressive, but gets a little bit too tunnel visioned and takes some shots that are very ill-advised. And then the defensive end, he's really not providing any resistance whatsoever. He's never been a good defender over the first few seasons of his career, but now that the Rockets are a really good defensive team and they've got a number of guys that can hold their own, it becomes way more noticeable. And again, these are mistakes that if he was making them the past couple of years, which he was, they're not as big of a deal because the Rockets were bad. They were tanking. They were trying to get top picks, but now they're trying to be more competitive. They're in the midst of a really tough playoff play-in race in the Western Conference. They need guys that can do something on either side of the ball, and so far this season, Jalen Green really hasn't been able to do anything on either side. On the season, he's averaging a career low in points per game, field goal percentage, three-point percentage, and minutes in a year that I thought was going to be his breakout season. I thought the addition of Fred VanVleet would be huge for him. For the past few years, he hasn't really been playing alongside a playmaking point guard, but now he had someone who could handle the ball, get him some off-ball looks, just set him up for easier shots than he's ever had in the past. You've also got Alperen Şengün, who showed a lot of promise as a playmaker last year, and coming into this season with Ime Udoka in place, I felt like it was going to be a big year for Şengün, whose playmaking could also really open up the game for Jalen Green, not to mention that both those guys, in addition to Jabari Smith Jr. maybe taking a jump, Dylan Brooks being in the equation, there are all these new offensive options around him, which even if his numbers theoretically dropped, should allow him to get better looks, thereby raising the efficiency a ton. I thought even if his point total didn't jump up to 25 points per game or something like that, he at the very least would be a lot more efficient, but instead, he's in the midst of one of the most inefficient seasons out of anybody in the NBA right now. His performance has been a big cloud hanging over what has otherwise been a really good Rocket season so far. Fred VanVleet and Dylan Brooks have both looked like fantastic signings. Dylan Brooks in particular, who is not only still a great defender, but finally has figured out when to take shots. He's doing it way more efficiently. I didn't like the signing, I'll be honest. Not many people did, but Dylan Brooks has proven me wrong. He's been fantastic. Fred VanVleet has been a veteran leader that's gotten a lot of guys to step up. Jabari Smith Jr., like I referenced earlier, has looked more and more like the player they drafted him to be, as this all-around Swiss Army knife defender, shot creator, release valve on the three-point line. He's doing all those things at a pretty solid level so far, as still one of the younger players on this roster. Alperen Şengün, again, looking more and more like an all-star and maybe like a player that can be their franchise guy. Ime Udoka has been a great addition for them as a head coach. Other players like, for example, Tari Eason have also looked great this season. It's been a year of jumps, of strides for the Houston Rockets as a team, as a franchise, as a core, but Jalen Green hasn't really been part of that. As I'm currently recording this video, the Houston Rockets are 15-14, good for the 8th seed in the Western Conference. They're tied with the Lakers at 9, half a game up on the Suns at 10 and Warriors at 11, and they're 5 games up on the Memphis Grizzlies at 13, who are currently trying to storm their way back into the play-in picture. So while they've been pretty solid so far, they are kind of teetering on the edge right there of being a play-in team or being a lottery squad. It's really tough. Every game matters, and if the Rockets want to go ahead and take the next step, even if it's not this season, say they miss the playoffs, miss the play-in, whatever, it doesn't really matter. Regardless of what happens for the Rockets this season, I think it's been a success, but for them to really take the jump over the next couple of years, they need guys to break out into stars. Şengün has done it. Jabari Smith feels like he's on a path to being at the very least a really solid role player. Jalen Green is someone who has to take some kind of jump for this Rockets core to reach its true potential. He was drafted 2nd overall a couple years ago. When he was picked, he was supposed to be the franchise guy. A lot of people saw him as a future scoring champion type of player. That was a constant thing that people said about him, going into the Summer League, coming out the G League Ignite, just being drafted by this Rockets team. He was looked at as one of the future best scorers in the NBA, but despite the insane athleticism, the flashes that he's shown, just all around talent, it feels like he showcases a lot throughout his career. He hasn't become a good player quite yet, and I'm not giving up on him being a good player, but the Rockets need it to happen sooner than later if he wants to be a long-term piece of this core. They are rapidly ascending, and they've got a big decision to make this offseason. This offseason is when he can go ahead and get a big-time contract extension if the Rockets want to go ahead and offer him it. And you would think they would, at least a few years ago when they drafted him. It was like, oh, that would be a no-brainer if you asked someone back then, but now I don't really know what kind of money they offer him, because as much potential as he's shown at moments, he has yet to put it together consistently. And if you give a lot of money to Jalen Green and he doesn't turn into anything, you've severely handicapped this team that feels like it's got a lot of potential from adding a big name player in the future. So they've got a decision to make. It's a big rest decision for Jalen Green to try and go out there and show that he can be a part of this core, that he can be one of the stars. And if the Rockets want to reach their true potential over the next few years, they need Jalen Green to break out into that star type of player. At this point, I guess it's just a waiting game. Maybe this performance, which again was solid, this was one of his better performances as of late. Maybe it's one that'll go ahead and get him back in a rhythm that will get the ball rolling, and he'll end up having a pretty solid season. but I'm just not feeling very optimistic about him for the rest of the year, about the upcoming seasons in his career. He's still really, really young. I'm not giving up on him by any means, but it's probably disappointing for the Houston Rockets as a franchise that Jalen Green hasn't taken that next step when a lot of other guys are. Just imagine where they'd be right now if Jalen Green was playing up to the all-star caliber level that a lot of people thought he could reach this season. They'd probably be a top 4 team in the Western Conference and be absolutely terrifying, but instead they're hovering right around that play-in range, which again, still great for the way the Rockets have played the past couple of seasons. It's a great step forward, but Jalen Green right now is a problem that they have to think about a little bit, and maybe he just ends up being more of a bench scorer. Maybe he's a trade chip down the line as a young piece that another team takes a chance on if the Rockets decide later on to go out there and try and add an established star to this core group of guys to take them to the next level, which would be a shame because, again, I was a big believer in Jalen Green. He just has not been good. Moving on from that game, I've got a couple more I want to go in depth into before rapid fire. First one is Thunder versus Knicks. You know me, I've got to talk about my Oklahoma City Thunder, especially because they just got a huge back-to-back set of wins. They beat the Minnesota Timberwolves, blowing them out, and then tonight beat the New York Knicks, who are a really good team. They moved to 29 on the season. The Knicks made it interesting in the third quarter and parts of the fourth, but by the end, the Thunder end up winning somewhat comfortably. Jalen Williams sets his career high with 36 points. I think he shot 13 of 17 from the field, was completely dominant, 5 of 5 from deep. He's nearing a 50-40-90 season with the defense he's been putting up, nearing 20 points per game. I've said for years that Dub is, or I guess only 2 years, which technically I guess is years, Jalen Williams, I've been saying, is going to be a future all-star. He's starting to reach that level now. I think within the next couple seasons he makes a game, and his impact is unbelievable. People don't talk enough about what he does for this team. Shea also ties him for the highest scoring game. He has 36 points, 7 boards, 8 assists, only player other than Allen Iverson and Michael Jordan at this point to have 10 straight games of 25 plus points and 2 steals. Not just a legit MVP candidate, but he is firmly in the top upper echelon of that race as one of the top 10 players in the world. For Chet Holmgren, 22 points, 5 rebounds, 1 assist with 4 blocks. Just a ridiculous defensive force, creating some ridiculously difficult shots as well. When people talk about Chet Holmgren being only set up by his teammates and not really doing much shot creation of his own, that's just not true. I'll show a lot of highlights in this section of the video so you can see that, because Chet had a ridiculous game in terms of self-shot creation. Also, for the Thunder as a team, they had just 4 turnovers, which is the lowest mark by, I believe, any team in the NBA so far this season. They took care of the ball, they scored efficiently, they played decent enough defense to get the win. Huge W for the Thunder, who continue to stay up there with the Timberwolves and the Nuggets as the top 3 teams in the West, and they're currently on pace for 56 wins. I tried to be objective before the season. I think I projected us to win 46 games, be a 6 seed, but I mean, hey, if we keep playing like this, not much is going to stop us from being one of the top seeds in the Western Conference. As for the Knicks, their top guys were the usual suspects. Jalen Brunson, 24 points, 4 rebounds, and 7 assists, although he did have some rough turnovers in there. Julius Randle, kind of similar thing, some rough turnovers, but 25 points, 9 boards, and 2 assists. They did what they could to keep the Knicks in this game, but ultimately wasn't enough, partially because RJ Barrett was really bad. 14 points, 4 rebounds, and 4 assists with 5 turnovers, shooting 5 of 14 from the field, and 1 of 7 from deep. There were multiple times in this game where the Thunder were perfectly content just letting him shoot a wide open 3. We would double on some guys or send more pressure over, leaving RJ wide open in the corner because we just weren't expecting him to hit those shots, which he really hasn't this season. He started off really hot and it felt like, oh, this may be the RJ Barrett breakout season, building off a great playoff run he had for the Knicks last year, but instead he's fallen off a cliff again, looking like the same inefficient wing. And in this game, he probably shouldn't have been playing late. Tom Thibodeau took Immanuel Quickley out, who was one of the Knicks' best players tonight, in favor of RJ Barrett. You could see Quickley was kind of upset about that. He kind of put his head down, ran back to the bench, didn't do anything crazy, but it was very clear that it somewhat bothered him, and I don't blame him. Quickley was a big reason why the Knicks were ever in this game in the first place after the Thunder were destroying them early on. He was fantastic, and just in general, Quickley deserves better. He went from being the second place finisher in Sixth Man of the Year voting last year, being one of the Knicks' most important players, to now getting less minutes than last season. I don't understand that. It feels like he's got a world of potential. He's really good defensively. He's efficient. He does all the little things that this Knicks team needs, but instead he gets benched in moments where he probably shouldn't be benched. He doesn't get rewarded with minutes. I don't know. It feels like he may be on his way out for the Knicks, because I know he's going to ask for a big contract in the offseason, but if the Knicks let him walk, I think that'd be a massive shame. You got to find a way to keep him. And meanwhile, for RJ Barrett, they probably got to find a way sooner than later to try and move off of his money, because I just don't think he's a fit on this team. Final game I want to go in depth into is Cavs versus Mavericks, mainly because in a game with no Darius Garland, no Evan Mobley, no Donovan Mitchell, and the Cavs being down 20 at one point, they were down double digits with 7 minutes to go, down 7 with 5 minutes, 21 seconds to go. The Cavs find a way to go ahead and get a win. It was a huge clutch time performance, mainly from Caris LeVert, who had his monthly game where he looks like an all-star, 29 points, 2 boards, and 7 assists. The Cavs announcer said something like, he's one of the few guys in the league that can go out there and carry your whole offense, which most nights maybe not, but tonight did seem to be the case. Jarrett Allen also had a monster game, 24 points, 23 boards, and 6 assists to go with 2 steals. He was wrecking everything for the Cavaliers out there, being fantastic on the defensive end as well. There was one stretch where the Mavericks couldn't buy a bucket for what felt like 5 minutes, and a lot of that was the rim protection of Jarrett Allen down low. He was fantastic. Luka Doncic did his best in this game. They went really cold as of late. The Cavs swarmed him. He had 29 points in the first half, only finished with 39, but he did add 7 rebounds, 6 assists, 2 steals, and 2 blocks, which is a fantastic stat line. The Cavs just continued to send doubles and a lot of pressure at him over the course of the second half, and particularly down the stretch. Especially on the last possession of the game where the ball gets inbounded to Luka, they send 2 at him. Nobody really comes to the ball. He finally gets the ball to Seth Curry, who ends up getting blocked. Cavs go on to win. They need to get him some more help. Still, Kyrie Irving coming back will do a lot for this team, but even with Kyrie back, I still feel like the Mavericks need a bit more of an extra piece for this team, a consistent guy. They rely a lot on role players who can sometimes have big games, like sometimes Tim Hardaway Jr. looks unstoppable, although other nights he looks like he can't buy a bucket, like, for example, tonight. I just think they need more consistent weapons out there. Luka was very visibly frustrated after the game ended getting this loss, because it's not a game that they should go out there and lose. The Cavs were missing 3 of their top 5 players, maybe even their 3 best players, and they still couldn't find a way to beat them. To wrap up the rest of the games, the Bucks dominate the Brooklyn Nets due to 32, 10, and 8 from Giannis, 27, 3, and 10 from Chris. One of their better games of the season. This Bucks team is really rolling right now. The Raptors blow out the Wizards by 30 with 26 points from OG, 20, 12, and 8 from Scotty Barnes, and 22, 6, and 11 from Pascal. And finally, the Sixers get a win without Joel Embiid due to 22 points from Tobias Harris, 15 and 10 from Paul Reed, 22 from Melton, and 23 from Tyrese Maxey, taking down the Orlando Magic, who are on a bit of a skid as of late. With all that being said, those are my thoughts on the games from tonight. Let me know down below in the comments what your takeaways were. Also, let me know what you think about the Jalen Green situation. Should they trade him? Should they hold on to him? What would you give him in the offseason in terms of a contract extension? Should they just wait until next offseason and see how he plays the year following? And just what do you think of the Houston Rockets in general? Do they need Jalen Green to become a star to reach their potential? Or do you think they can still do that even if he never becomes the player that he seemed to potentially be coming into the draft? Leave a like and subscribe if you enjoyed. Hit the notification bell so you don't miss out on future videos. I appreciate y'all watching. I'll see y'all later. Real one, say it back.